Thank you for listening to my recorded lecture. This lecture will cover Chapter 5, Organ Systems, in the Human Body in Health and Disease textbook. Before we dig into this lecture, let's refamiliarize ourselves with two terms, organ and organ system. An organ is a structure that's made up of two or more kinds of tissues, and these tissues together can perform a more complex function than a single tissue alone. An organ system is a group of organs that work together to accomplish a common goal that is more complex than one of the organs alone could perform. Remember, cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, and organs make up organ systems. A good example of this would be a myocyte. A myocyte is a muscle cell. Those muscle cells, when they come together, comprise muscle tissue. Muscle tissue makes up the bladder, and the bladder joins the kidneys, the ureters, and other organs to comprise the urinary system. The first organ system that we're going to talk about is the integumentary system. The integumentary system is a single organ we refer to as the skin. Did you know that the skin weighs approximately 20 pounds or more, accounting for about 16% of our total body weight? Now, while the skin is a single organ, it has several structures that help it out, that are attached to it. And these appendages include hair, nails, sense receptors, sweat glands, and oil glands. Not only is the skin's function to protect us from our environment, it also helps with regulating body temperature, synthesizes chemicals, and helps us to sense the environment around us. The skeletal system is comprised of 206 bones. Not only is the skeletal system comprised of bones, but there are also related tissues such as cartilage and ligaments. Remember, in Chapter 4, Tissues, we talked about cartilage being a fibrous connective tissue that covers the ends of bones. This would be hyaline cartilage. Ligaments are also dense fibrous connective bands that link bones to one another. Now, bones come together at a place called a joint, and there's various types of joints and specific movements of these joints that we will talk about later on when we specifically dig into the skeletal system. Now, there are several functions that the skeletal system performs. The first one is it serves as a support framework for our entire body. Bones also serve as attachments for ligaments, like we've already talked about, and tendons. The skeletal system also helps to protect vital organs like our brain, our lungs, our heart, and our kidneys. Bones store minerals, and they serve as a resting place for hematopoietic tissue, which, as we learned in Chapter 4, assists with the production of blood cells. The muscular system and the skeletal system operate together and work very closely with one another, and oftentimes we refer to them together as the musculoskeletal system or the skeletal muscular system. The structures of muscles are either voluntary, involuntary, or cardiac. And we talked about the difference between these three. Remember, voluntary muscles are also called striated or skeletal muscles, and they can move upon our will. If we think about moving our arm, we can move our arm. Those are using voluntary muscles. Involuntary muscles line the walls of organs like the intestines or vessels, and those are muscles that we don't have control of. And then cardiac muscle is a hybrid of the two. It is involuntary and it is striated, and it also has these special little structures called intercalcated discs that allow the muscle cells to connect to one another and beat in unison. So the function of the muscular system is similar to the skeletal system, and that is movement. Together they work in unison to help us move our bodies. There are two divisions of the nervous system, the central nervous system, or CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, PNS. The central nervous system is comprised of the brain and the spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is comprised of all the rest of the nerves of the body, including cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The function of the nervous system is a communication pathway between body organs and systems. It's an integrated system that allows us to sense our environment as well as assist the body with maintaining homeostasis. The endocrine system is composed of glands that secrete chemicals known as hormones. Now, the endocrine glands are referred to as ductless glands, and what this means is that they secrete their hormones directly into the bloodstream. Now, the endocrine system and the nervous system work very closely with one another. The nervous system uses electrical impulses, where the endocrine system uses chemical communication. So the nervous system provides a very rapid and fast response in the body, where the endocrine system provides a slower but longer lasting response. And so there's several glands that make up this system, and they're listed here: the pituitary, the pineal, the hypothalamus, the thyroid, the parathyroid, thymus, adrenal glands, pancreas, and the gonads of the male and the female. As I mentioned, their functions are very similar to the nervous system in that they provide a chemical communication that helps to control various processes in the body. Now, while it is slower acting, it has a longer duration. So again, the nervous system and the endocrine system work in tandem to help maintain homeostasis of the body. The cardiovascular system is a closed system that is comprised of the heart, the arteries, and the veins. We often refer to this as the circulatory system, and its primary functions are to transport substances throughout the body, like oxygen and carbon dioxide. It also helps to regulate body temperature, and it helps to provide our body's defense mechanism, which is immunity. The lymphatic system plays a big role in immune support, so we typically talk about the lymphatic system and the immune system together. The lymphatic system is comprised of 4 main types of structures, which are the lymphatic vessels that you see all of these green little lines in the image here. Those are the lymphatic vessels. Lymph nodes, these little kind of circular dots, green dots that you're seeing, are the lymph nodes. And then also the tonsils, the thymus, and the spleen. The thymus was also mentioned in the endocrine system because not only does it help to support our immune system, but it's also an endocrine gland. So the main function of the lymphatic system is to support immunity. And one way it does this is by moving fluid from in between the cells, that interstitial fluid, into the lymphatic vessels in a unidirectional fashion and filtering that fluid to filter out bacteria, cancerous cells, and other debris. In the future, we will talk extensively about the immune system, but for now, just familiarize with the components and the basic functions of the immune system. So the components of the immune system are phagocytes. Remember, we talked about phagocytosis. So phagocytes are those protective cells that engulf bacteria or other debris and digest them. There's also secretory cells, cells that secrete defensive proteins, proteins such as antibodies and other complement proteins that help protect us from disease. So the function of the immune system is literally to protect our body from invading microorganisms. And one way is through phagocytosis, and the other way is through chemical reactions that serve to protect us against various types of harmful agents like microorganisms. There are several structures associated with the respiratory system, and those are the nose, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. So the job of the respiratory system is to help us breathe, not only to help us take in oxygen, but to help us get rid of waste gases like carbon dioxide. Another function of the respiratory system is the filtration of irritants from inspired air. The nose also helps to warm and humidify the air before it is actually introduced into the trachea, bronchi, and lungs. And then lastly, regulation of acid-base balance, and this has to do with cellular respiration. So as we burn fuel in our cells, the waste product is carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide is converted into an acid. So the respiratory system takes part in regulating that acid-base balance. There are several structures that are associated with the digestive system, and they're divided up into the primary organs and the secondary organs. So the primary organs, if you think about the path that food follows from the mouth to the anus, those are our primary organs: the mouth, the throat, the esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, rectum, and anus. Those secondary organs are those that kind of help out and aid in the digestion of food, like teeth. Teeth help to mechanically break down the food, while salivary glands secrete enzymes that help to further break down the food. The tongue allows us to push food around our mouth. The liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas all secrete different types of substances or hormones or enzymes that help with that breakdown of food so that it can be, the nutrients can be absorbed and used in our bodies. Like I mentioned, the digestive system serves to help break down food both mechanically and chemically, to absorb the nutrients from that food, and to eliminate the waste of the undigested food. The urinary system is comprised of the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. And an interesting note is that the male urethra serves functions in both the urinary and reproductive systems, while the female is simply the urinary system. So the job of the urinary system is basically to clean the blood and excrete waste as urine. Remember, the digestive system excretes waste as feces. The urinary system excretes waste as urine. The urinary system and the kidneys specifically also help to regulate electrolyte and water balance, as well as acid-base balance. There are several structures associated with the male reproductive system. The first is the testes. The testes are the gonads of the male reproductive system, and this is where the sperm develop and mature. There are tubes connecting each testicle to their urethra, and this serves as a pathway for sperm, and these are called the vas deferens. The prostate and other glands, such as the seminal vesicles and the bulbourethral glands, all produce fluids that contribute to the semen. And the semen is the liquid part that joins with the sperm that nourishes them and protects them during the reproductive process. The external genitalia consists of the penis and the scrotum. So the function of the male reproductive system is to produce sperm and then to introduce sperm into the female reproductive tract for fertilization. Here we see a picture of the female reproductive system. The gonads of this system are referred to as the ovaries. There are two ovaries, and this is where the ova, the eggs, develop and are expelled in that ovulation cycle every month. Now, other structures that are related to the female reproductive system are the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the vagina, the external genitalia, and the breasts. The functions of the female reproductive system are similar to the male reproductive system in that it permits, it receives the male sex cell and permits fertilization. So production of the ova starts in the ovary, and the fembria of the fallopian tubes is what is going to have like this little sweeping motion, and they're going to sweep that egg up into the tube, and the tube has like a muscular type, a peristaltic type motion, and it also has these little sweeping cilia that's going to help to sweep the egg along the tube and into the uterus. The male sex cell typically finds the egg in the tube, and fertilization often occurs there. Sometimes when this happens, the egg can implant into the side of the tube, and this is what is referred to as an ectopic pregnancy. But if all goes well, the fertilized egg finds itself inside the uterus, and it implants itself in the wall of the uterus, and the uterus serves as a place where the fetus can develop, and it also nourishes the growing offspring. And then when the time is right, we talked about this being an example of a positive feedback loop. Oxytocin is going to be released, is going to signal the uterus to begin contraction until the baby is born. The body as a whole is comprised of 11 systems. And these systems work separately as well as together to maintain homeostasis of the body. And the only way that this works perfectly is when all of these systems are fully functioning and online. Now, when we think about the aging process and its ability to maintain homeostasis, that ability starts to decline with aging because the functioning of body systems begin to decline. Now, it's not only with aging. Sometimes there are diseases or genetic mutations that cause something to go wrong. And in that case, sometimes we can use prostheses or organ donations to help those systems become fully functioning again. So we're going to talk about some of those things. So first we're going to talk about organ replacement. I looked up some interesting facts about organ replacement, and I found that 100 organ transplants take place each day. And interestingly, one person's organs can save 8 lives and enhance 75 other lives through organ, eye, and tissue donation. So we consider organ replacement when there's a loss of function of either a non-vital organ, which would be non-life-threatening or not immediately life-threatening, or loss of a vital organ, which would be immediately life-threatening. Some ways we can treat, like I mentioned, is with non-vital organ replacement, such as a prosthesis, a vital organ transplant, surgical transplants, free flaps, and stem cell treatments. As I mentioned before, about 100 organ transplants take place each day, and some examples of organs that are vital that we replace are the kidneys, the liver, the pancreas, the lungs, the small intestine, and then as you see in this image here, the heart. Now, one thing that we have to worry about is rejection of these organs. And because of these proteins that the plasma membrane secretes called antigens. Each individual has their own specific antigens, and because of this, other bodies detect these different antigens from the donated organ, and they see it as a foreign invader, and the body's immune system will attack that organ. So to help decrease that probability of an attack on the organ, they give something called immunosuppressive drugs. And immunosuppressive drugs are good in the fact that they help to increase the chance that the organ will survive. However, they do suppress the patient's immune system, and that could leave them vulnerable to other diseases or sicknesses like pneumonia and other types of bacterial infections or viruses. Aside from vital organ replacements, something else we do in surgery is called tissue grafting. And sometimes the tissue grafts that we use are synthetic, which means they're not made from real tissue. And other times they come from the same species, a human, or different species like pigs and cows, or they can be a graft that comes from the patient themselves. So some examples of grafts that come from the patient themselves are different types of tissue flaps or skin grafts or tendon grafts. So this top image here on the left where it says free tram flap, TRAM stands for transverse rectus abdominis musculocutaneous flap. That's why we say TRAM, because that's a mouthful. But a TRAM flap is typically used to rebuild a breast after a mastectomy. And as you can see here in the picture, they take this elliptical sized graft from the abdomen, and this is a full thickness graft. It's going to be skin, fat, and a portion of the rectus abdominis. It's what we call a free flap. So as opposed to a pedicle flap where it's still attached to some blood supply, they're going to completely remove this flap and they're going to graft it in to another artery and vein that's nearby where the graft is going to go. So that's one example. The top right is a split thickness skin graft that has been put through a mesher. We talked about that in class, how these split thickness skin grafts are better for covering larger areas or defects. Bottom left, you see some tendon grafts. We can also use cadaver grafts of tendons to replace like anterior cruciate ligaments and Achilles tendons and biceps tendons. And the way that they're processed, there's no type of rejection from the patient at all. But these are what we call autografts, meaning self-grafts that you see on the bottom left. And then on the bottom right, this is an example of a full thickness skin graft. So with a full thickness skin graft, we're taking skin, epidermis, dermis, and adipose most of the time. And these grafts are good for covering small defects, such as this one that you see on the hand here. Science and technology has also enabled us to perform tissue and organ engineering. These tissues are made from stem cells and they're grown in the lab. And here you can see the bottom left is a tissue that has been grown, that's a vessel. And then on the top right, you can see an ear that was engineered in the lab. So technology is awesome and is allowing us to hopefully get to a point where those 150,000 people that are waiting for different types of vital organs, we will be able to produce those in a lab, and we will be able to save those people so that there won't be any more waiting lists. Last, we're going to talk about examples of prostheses. So prostheses are synthetic types of devices that are typically used in place of non-vital organs. Some good examples are given here, like the cochlear implant that actually helps with hearing, contact lenses, the pacemaker, insulin infusion devices, artificial hip joints, knee joints. We can replace toe joints, elbow joints, wrist joints. Pretty much every joint in the body. Shoulders can be replaced with these artificial joints. Dialysis machines serve the purpose of the kidney, so artificial kidney machines, and then also mechanical arms and mechanical legs. So that concludes our lecture on organ systems. Make sure that you identify your muddy points and be ready to discuss those in class. I'll see you then.